The train whistle pierced the silence of the autumn afternoon as it pulled into Hays City, Kansas, in 1875. Nora Mitchell clutched her small carpetbag with trembling fingers, her wedding dress crumpled from the 3-day journey. Tears streamed down her face, blurring the train station before her as she stepped onto the wooden platform. This wasn't how she had imagined beginning her new life, but desperation had a way of reshaping dreams into something unrecognizable. The platform bustled with activity porters unloading luggage, families reuniting, cowboys securing shipments. Nora stood frozen, her chestnut hair falling loose from her once neat bun, her green eyes red-rimmed from crying. She had sent her photograph to Samuel Xanders 3 months ago, along with letters describing a confident, capable woman who could manage a household and bear strong children. The truth was far different. She was 22, alone, and terrified. Samuel spotted her immediately. Not because she matched the photograph he kept in his vest pocket, but because of the tears. He'd expected a smiling bride eager to begin their life together, not this trembling woman who looked like she might collapse at any moment. At 30, Samuel had built his cattle ranch from nothing, weathering droughts and rustlers with the same stoic determination that defined him. He'd never expected to find a wife through a newspaper advertisement, but loneliness had a way of changing a man's mind. "Miss Mitchell?" he asked, approaching cautiously. His tall frame and broad shoulders cast a shadow over her, but his voice was unexpectedly gentle. Nora looked up, startled. This man was more handsome than his photograph had suggested: sun-bronzed skin, dark blonde hair beneath a well-worn hat, and eyes the color of a summer sky. But it was the kindness in those eyes that momentarily stunned her into silence. "Mr. Xanders." She finally managed, hastily wiping at her tears with her sleeve. Samuel nodded, noticing how she straightened her posture and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I apologize for my appearance," Nora said, her voice artificially bright. "The journey was quite taxing, but I assure you I am ready to fulfill my duties as your wife. I can cook, clean, so you don't have to pretend with me," Samuel interrupted softly, reaching for her bag. "Whatever brought you here in tears, whatever you're running from, it doesn't matter now." Nora's practiced speech died on her lips, her facade crumbling as fresh tears welled in her eyes. No one had shown her such kindness in a very long time. "Come on," he said, gently guiding her toward a waiting wagon. "Let's get you home." The word home sounded foreign to Nora's ears. Home had ceased to exist when her father died 6 months ago, leaving behind nothing but debts and a daughter with few prospects. The mail-order bride advertisement had seemed like Providence, a chance to escape Boston and the creditors hounding her. Samuel helped her onto the wagon bench, handling her as if she might shatter. The horses started forward with a gentle click of his tongue, and Hays City began to fall away behind them. "It's about an hour to the ranch," he explained, eyes on the road ahead. "Not much to look at compared to Boston, I expect." Nora dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "How did you know I'm from Boston? Your letters mentioned it, and your accent gives you away." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Besides, only city folk cry over dirt roads and open skies." Despite herself, Nora laughed, a small, genuine sound that surprised them both. "I'm not crying over the landscape, Mr. Xanders." "Samuel," he corrected. "Or Sam, if you prefer. Seems we should be on a first-name basis if we're to be married." Married. The word hung between them, heavy with expectation. "We don't have to," Samuel said after a moment, sensing her discomfort. "Get married right away, I mean. You can stay as my housekeeper until you decide." Nora stared at him, bewildered. "But you paid for my passage, the contract. I won't hold you to any contract you signed out of desperation, he said firmly. This isn't what either of us expected, I reckon. The wagon jostled over a rut in the road and Nora gripped the wooden seat. What did you expect, Mr. Samuel? He considered this, pushing his hat back slightly. Honestly, I don't know. Not tears, certainly. Maybe someone who wanted to be here. His bluntness should have offended her, but Nora found it refreshing after months of hiding her true feelings. I do want to be here, she said softly. Just not like this, not running away. We're all running from something out here, Samuel replied. That's what the West is for. They fell into silence as the wagon rolled through the golden prairie, the October sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. Nora watched the landscape unfold, so different from the crowded streets and brick buildings of Boston. There was a vastness to it that both terrified and exhilarated her. There it is, Samuel said eventually, nodding toward a collection of buildings nestled against a gentle slope. The Flying X. The ranch wasn't what Nora had pictured. Instead of a crude cabin, a proper two-story farmhouse stood proudly, painted white with green shutters. A large barn, corrals, and several outbuildings completed the scene. It was modest compared to the homes she'd known in Boston, but solid and well-maintained. You built all this? She asked, unable to hide her surprise. Samuel nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. 7 years of work. Started with nothing but a claim and 20 head of cattle. Now I've got over 500 head and 12,000 acres. As they approached, a large dog bounded from the porch, barking excitedly. That's Rusty, Samuel explained. He looks fierce, but he's gentle as a lamb. The dog confirmed this by immediately laying his head on Nora's lap when Samuel helped her down from the wagon, tail wagging furiously. He likes you, Samuel observed. That's a good sign. A weathered man in his 60s emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. This the missus, boss. He called. This is Miss Mitchell, Samuel corrected. Nora, this is Henry Patterson. He's been with me since the beginning. Henry tipped his hat respectfully. Madam, good to finally meet you. Boss has been fixing up the place for weeks, getting ready. Nora glanced at Samuel, who looked almost embarrassed. Henry, could you see to the horses? Samuel asked, clearly wanting to change the subject. I'll show Miss Mitchell around. The inside of the house was surprisingly comfortable. Simple furnishings, but clean and well arranged. A large stone fireplace dominated the sitting room, and windows let in the fading afternoon light. Samuel showed her the kitchen with its cast iron stove and wooden cupboards, the dining room with a table that could seat 8, and finally, upstairs to a bedroom with a newly made bed and a quilt in shades of blue and green. This will be your room, he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Mine's down the hall. There's water in the pitcher if you want to freshen up. Supper will be ready soon. Henry's wife, Martha, comes up from their cabin to cook sometimes. Nora nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of her situation. Thank you, she managed. Samuel lingered a moment longer. Nora, he said hesitantly, I meant what I said earlier. You don't have to pretend with me. Whatever brought you here in tears, you can tell me when you're ready, or never if that's your choice. But I won't have a marriage built on lies and pretending. After he left, Nora sat on the edge of the bed, unexpected tears pricking her eyes again. She had come prepared to play a role, the perfect, dutiful wife, believing it was her only chance at survival. Samuel's kindness, his willingness to give her time and space, was something she hadn't dared hope for. She washed her face in the basin, changed into a fresh dress, and pinned her hair back neatly. By the time she descended the stairs, Martha Patterson had arrived, a round-faced woman with kind eyes who immediately took Nora under her wing. Land sakes, girl, you're thin as a rail, she clucked, setting another biscuit on Nora's plate. We'll have to fatten you up some. Supper was a simple affair of beef stew, biscuits, and apple pie, but it was the best meal Nora had eaten in months. The conversation flowed easily, with Henry regaling her with stories of the ranch's early days and Samuel's occasional quiet corrections when the older man exaggerated. "Boss pulled 3 calves from the creek during that flood," Henry insisted. "Near drowned himself doing it." "It was 2 calves," Samuel said mildly, "and the creek was barely up to my waist." "That's not how I remember it," Henry winked at Nora. "You city folk don't know what real work is till you've seen this man during calving season." After supper, Martha shooed the men away and enlisted Nora's help with the dishes. "Samuel's a good man," she said once they were alone. "Best I've known. He doesn't talk much, but his actions speak plenty loud." Nora nodded, carefully drying a plate. "He seems kind." "More than kind," Martha corrected. "Honorable. He'll never mistreat you, never raise a hand to you, and never break a promise. That's rarer than gold out here." Nora thought of the men she'd known in Boston, the suitors her father had approved, the creditors who'd leered at her after his death, suggesting ways she could work off the debt. Samuel was indeed different. "I don't know if I can be the wife he deserves," Nora confessed quietly. Martha's eyes softened. "Honey, he doesn't expect some perfect Eastern lady, he just wants someone to share his life with. The rest will come in time." Later, as Nora prepared for bed, she heard a soft knock at her door. Samuel stood there, holding a small wooden box. "I forgot to give you this earlier," he said, passing it to her. "It's not much, but I thought you might like it." Inside the box was a silver hairbrush and mirror set, simple but elegant. "It was my mother's," Samuel explained. "Seemed fitting for a lady's dressing table." Nora ran her fingers over the delicate engravings. "It's beautiful, are you sure?" Samuel nodded. "She would have wanted you to have it. Sleep well, Nora." That night, lying in a strange bed in a strange house with a man she barely knew down the hall, Nora wondered if perhaps she had found not just shelter, but sanctuary. The following days fell into a pattern. Samuel rose before dawn to work with the cattle, returning midday for dinner, then back to work until supper. Nora took over the household duties, learning the rhythms of ranch life from Martha, who came daily to help. On her 3rd day at the Flying X, Nora ventured into town with Samuel to purchase supplies and meet the preacher who would marry them eventually, when Nora was ready. Hays City was nothing like Boston, with its single main street lined with wooden buildings, but it had a certain frontier charm. "Mrs. Xanders, I presume," the mercantile owner greeted her, causing Nora to flush. "Not yet," Samuel corrected quietly. "Miss Mitchell is my house guest for now." Whispers followed them throughout town. A mail-order bride who wasn't yet a bride was fodder for gossip. By the time they reached Reverend Thompson's small church, Nora's nerves were frayed. "Don't mind them," Samuel reassured her as they waited for the reverend. "Small towns run on gossip like engines run on coal." Reverend Thompson was younger than Nora expected, perhaps 35, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Samuel explained your situation," he told Nora. "Take all the time you need. Marriage is not something to rush into, especially out here where divorce is nearly impossible." Nora appreciated his understanding, but she felt the pressure of her precarious position. Without marriage, she had no security, no claim to anything should Samuel tire of her presence. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Nora finally gathered her courage. "I should tell you why I came here," she said softly. Samuel remained silent, giving her space to continue. "My father was a businessman in Boston, respected, successful, or so everyone thought. When he died, I discovered he'd been living well beyond his means for years. The creditors took everything, down to my mother's jewelry." Nora's voice wavered. I had nowhere to go, no relatives, no skills that would earn a living. One of the creditors, a man my father's age, offered to forgive the debt if I would. You don't have to say it, Samuel said, his jaw tight with anger on her behalf. I ran, Nora continued, determined to finish. I saw your advertisement that same day. It seemed like Providence. But I was so afraid you'd be like him, or that you'd send me back if you knew I had nothing, no dowry, no family connections, nothing but debts behind me. So I pretended to be what I thought you wanted. Samuel was quiet for so long that Nora feared she'd made a terrible mistake in confessing. My father was a drunk who beat my mother until the day she died, he finally said. I left home at 15, worked cattle drives until I saved enough for my own land. I understand running from the past, Nora, and I would never, ever send you back to face those men. Relief washed over her. So where does that leave us? Samuel looked thoughtful. Honest, for one thing, and maybe ready to start building something real. The next morning, Nora woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Looking out her window, she saw Samuel riding out with several ranch hands, heading toward the eastern pastures. Martha arrived an hour later bringing fresh eggs and news. Rustlers, she explained grimly. Took 20 head last night. Samuel and the boys went to track them. Fear gripped Nora's heart. Is it dangerous? Martha's expression said everything. These aren't gentlemen thieves, honey. They're desperate men with nothing to lose. All day, Nora worried, jumping at every sound. When Samuel hadn't returned by sundown, she paced the porch until her feet ached. Henry tried to reassure her, but his own concern was evident. Boss knows what he's doing, he said, though his eyes kept drifting to the horizon. Used to be a scout for the cavalry before he bought this place. It was well past midnight when the sound of horses finally broke the silence. Nora, who had been dozing in a chair by the window, rushed outside with a lantern. Samuel dismounted slowly, favoring his left side. In the lantern light, she could see blood staining his shirt. "You're hurt," she gasped. "Just a graze," he insisted, though his face was pale beneath his tan. "Got the cattle back. That's what matters." Nora and Henry helped him inside, where she insisted on treating the wound herself. It was indeed a bullet graze along his ribs, painful but not life-threatening. "What happened?" she asked, carefully cleaning the wound. Samuel winced as she applied antiseptic. "Caught up to them near the Red River. They didn't want to surrender peacefully. Did you?" Nora couldn't finish the question. "No," Samuel answered quietly, "but it was close, too close." As she bandaged his side, Nora was struck by how easily she could have lost him, this man she was only beginning to know, yet who had become so important to her. The realization was startling in its clarity. "Don't do that again," she said, her voice unsteady. Samuel looked up at her, surprise in his eyes. "The rustlers, risking your life," Nora clarified. "At least not without saying goodbye first." Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings neither had been ready to name. Samuel reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I'll try to remember that," he promised. 2 days later, Sheriff Davies rode out to take their statement about the rustlers. He brought news that the gang had been captured trying to sell the stolen cattle in Dodge City. "You're lucky, Xanders," the sheriff said, accepting a cup of coffee from Nora. "These weren't ordinary thieves. They've killed 3 ranchers over in Ellis County." Samuel nodded grimly. "I figured as much by how quick they were to start shooting." The sheriff turned his attention to Nora. "Mrs. Xanders, you've made quite an improvement to the place. Never seen it so homey." Before Nora could correct him, Samuel spoke up. "We haven't had the ceremony yet, Sheriff. Miss Mitchell is still deciding if ranch life suits her." Sheriff Davies looked between them, clearly confused by this unconventional arrangement. "Well, don't wait too long. Respectable women are scarce out here." After he left, Nora found Samuel in the barn brushing down his horse. The easy companionship they'd developed seemed suddenly strained. "The sheriff thinks I'm compromising your reputation," she said, leaning against the stall door. Samuel continued brushing. "People will talk no matter what we do. Does it bother you, what they say?" He stopped then, turning to face her. "Only if it bothers you." Nora considered this. In Boston, such an arrangement would have been scandalous, ruinous to a young woman's prospects. But here, in this place where survival often trumped social niceties, it seemed less important. "I think," she said carefully, "that I'm more concerned with what's true than what people say is true." Samuel studied her face. "And what's true, Nora?" "That I'm not ready to be a wife in all ways," she admitted, "but I'm also not ready to leave. That I'm starting to care for you more than I expected to. That I'm afraid of making another mistake." Samuel stepped closer, setting aside the brush. "I'm afraid too," he confessed. "Of not being the man you need. Of failing like I failed to protect my mother." His vulnerability touched her deeply. This strong, capable man who had built a life from nothing, who had faced down armed rustlers without flinching, was afraid of disappointing her. "Perhaps," Nora suggested, "we could be afraid together and see where that leads us." Samuel smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. "I'd like that." As autumn deepened toward winter, the ranch prepared for the coming cold. Hay was stored, buildings were reinforced, and preserves were put up. Nora threw herself into these preparations, finding satisfaction in the practical tasks that had no place in her previous life. She also began teaching at the small schoolhouse in Hayes City, 2 days a week, putting her education to use. The children, mostly from farming and ranching families, were eager to learn, and Nora discovered a talent for teaching she hadn't known she possessed. "You're good with them," Samuel observed one evening as she prepared lessons at the dining table. "They respect you." Nora looked up from her work. "Children know when you're genuine, I think. They can sense pretense." "Like a certain rancher I know," Samuel said with a small smile. Their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated: a partnership based on mutual respect and growing affection. They still slept in separate rooms, but their evenings were spent together, talking by the fire or reading aloud from Samuel's modest collection of books. In early December, Samuel announced he needed to travel to Topeka on business. "The railroad wants to expand through part of my grazing land," he explained over breakfast. "Need to negotiate terms. I'll be gone about 10 days. Nora tried to hide her disappointment. "Will Henry stay at the house?" "If you're comfortable with that. Or Martha could stay with you if you prefer." "I'll be fine," Nora assured him, though the thought of 10 days without him left an unexpected emptiness. The morning of his departure, Samuel lingered on the porch. "I've been thinking," he said hesitantly, "about Christmas. It's your first one here, and I thought maybe, when I get back, we could have a proper celebration, a tree and everything." Nora was touched by his thoughtfulness. "I'd like that very much. And maybe," he continued, his eyes meeting hers, "we could talk about the wedding. If you're ready." The word hung between them, full of promise and possibility. "Yes," Nora said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I think I'd like that too." Samuel's face brightened. He reached out, hesitated, then gently cupped her cheek. "I'll hurry back," he promised. The first few days after Samuel's departure passed uneventfully. Nora kept busy with household tasks and her teaching. On the 5th day, a blizzard swept in from the north, blanketing the ranch in snow and cutting off access to town. Henry assured her it was nothing unusual for December in Kansas. "Boss will wait it out in Topeka," he said confidently. "He knows better than to travel in this." But as days 7, 8, and 9 passed with no word and the snow continuing to fall, Nora's concern grew. Samuel should have been home, or at least sent word. By day 12, with Christmas just a week away, she was frantic with worry. "Something's wrong," she told Henry as they fed the livestock in the barn. "He would have sent a telegram if he was delayed." Henry looked troubled. "Lines might be down from the storm. Happens every winter." But Nora wasn't convinced. That night, unable to sleep, she made a decision. At first light, she would ride into town and send a telegram to the hotel in Topeka where Samuel was staying. The journey to Hays City was treacherous, with snow drifts higher than the wagon in places. Henry insisted on driving her, refusing to let her attempt it alone. They reached the telegraph office by mid-morning, where Nora hastily composed a message inquiring about Samuel's whereabouts. The operator's expression grew concerned as he read it. "Madam, I received a telegram for Mr. Xanders 2 days ago, from Topeka." Nora's heart raced. What did it say? That he left there 5 days ago, headed home, should have arrived by now. Fear seized her. Samuel was somewhere between Topeka and Hays City, possibly injured or worse, in the worst blizzard of the season. Sheriff Davies organized a search party immediately, but the continuing snow hampered their efforts. Nora insisted on joining them despite the danger, but the sheriff was adamant. "Mrs. Xanders, Miss Mitchell, you'd be putting more lives at risk. Best thing you can do is wait at the ranch in case he makes it back there." Reluctantly, Nora returned to the Flying X with Henry. The house had never felt so empty, so cold despite the roaring fire. That night, she slept in Samuel's room, finding some comfort in being surrounded by his things, his books, his clothes, the faint scent of him on the pillows. On the third day of searching, with hope fading, Rusty began barking frantically near sundown. Nora rushed to the porch to see a horse and rider approaching slowly through the snow. The figure was slumped over, barely staying in the saddle. "Samuel!" she cried, running into the snow without a coat or boots. Henry was close behind her as they reached the exhausted horse. Samuel was barely conscious, his face frostbitten and one arm bound in a makeshift sling. Together, they managed to get him into the house and close to the fire. "Train derailed," he mumbled as Nora removed his frozen clothes and wrapped him in warm blankets. "Bridge collapsed. Walked for miles. Horse broke loose from stable in town." "Hush now," Nora soothed, tears streaming down her face. "You're home. That's all that matters." His injuries were serious but not life-threatening: a broken arm, frostbite on his face and hands, exhaustion from exposure. The doctor, summoned from town the next day when the weather cleared slightly, marveled at his survival. "Most men would have died out there," he told Nora. "He must have had a powerful reason to make it home." Samuel's recovery was slow. For the first few days, fever kept him drifting in and out of consciousness. Nora rarely left his side, sleeping in a chair beside his bed, bathing his forehead with cool cloths, spooning broth between his cracked lips. On Christmas Eve, his fever finally broke. Nora had dozed off in her chair when his voice, weak but clear, woke her. "There's my guardian angel," he said softly. Nora's eyes filled with tears of relief. "You're back," she whispered. Samuel's good hand sought hers. "I made you a promise about Christmas." Nora laughed through her tears. "I don't need a tree or presents, I just need you alive." "Nevertheless," he insisted with a shadow of his usual stubbornness. "Henry cut a tree. It's in the parlor, waiting to be decorated." Nora kissed his hand, no longer caring about propriety or taking things slowly. Life was too precious, too fragile to waste in hesitation. "We'll decorate it together tomorrow," she promised. Christmas Day dawned clear and bright, the sun glinting off the snow-covered landscape. With Henry's help, Samuel made it downstairs to sit in a chair by the fire while Nora decorated the small pine tree with paper stars, dried berries, and popcorn strings. It's not quite what you're used to in Boston, Samuel apologized, watching her work. Nora placed the last ornament, a small carved horse that Henry had made on a branch. It's perfect, she said sincerely. Better than anything I've ever had. After a simple Christmas dinner, Henry and Martha discreetly excused themselves, leaving Samuel and Nora alone by the fire. Samuel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I had a gift for you," he said. "Left it in Topeka, I'm afraid." "What was it?" Nora asked, curious. "A ring. Not fancy, just a simple gold band. Thought you might need it if you decided to accept my proposal." Nora's heart skipped. "Are you proposing now, Samuel Xanders?" Despite his weakened state, Samuel managed a smile. "Seems like the right time, though not exactly how I planned it. Nearly dying has a way of clarifying what matters." He reached for her hand with his good one. "I love you, Nora Mitchell. Have since you stepped off that train in tears and tried to pretend you weren't terrified. I love your courage, your honesty, the way you've made this house a home. Will you marry me? Not because you need security or because I need a wife, but because we belong together." Nora had imagined this moment differently, perhaps after a proper courtship, when she felt more certain of her place in the world. But staring into Samuel's earnest blue eyes, she knew with absolute clarity that she wanted nothing more than to be his wife. "Yes," she said simply. "I will marry you, Samuel. I love you too." They were married on New Year's Day, 1876, in the parlor of the Flying X. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony with Henry and Martha as witnesses. Nora wore a dress of deep blue wool that Martha had helped her make, with a sprig of dried lavender from the summer garden pinned to her bodice. "I, Samuel James Xanders, take thee, Nora Elizabeth Mitchell, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Samuel promised, his arm still in a sling but his voice strong and sure. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When Nora repeated the vows, her voice didn't waver. The frightened young woman who had stepped off the train months ago was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who had found her place in this wild, beautiful land. "By the power vested in me by the state of Kansas," Reverend Thompson concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Their first kiss as husband and wife was tender, Samuel's good hand cradling her face as if she were made of porcelain. But there was promise in that kiss too of passion to come, of a life built together, day by day. That night, when Samuel took her in his arms in what was now their bedroom, there was no fear, only trust and desire. Their lovemaking was gentle due to his injuries, but no less profound for its tenderness. "I never thought I'd find this," Samuel whispered in the darkness afterward, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Someone to share everything with, the good and the bad." Nora curled against his side, careful of his broken arm. "I thought I was running away," she confessed. "But I was running toward something instead, toward you." Winter gave way to spring, and with it came new beginnings. The cattle thrived, calves were born, and the land renewed itself in vibrant green. Samuel's arm healed slowly but completely, and by April he was back to full strength, working alongside his men. Nora continued teaching, now twice a week at the schoolhouse. Her students adored her, and she found satisfaction in watching their minds open to new ideas. In the evenings, she and Samuel would sit on the porch, planning improvements to the ranch, a bigger garden, perhaps chickens, maybe even an orchard someday. In May, when the wildflowers carpeted the prairie in a riot of color, Nora confirmed what she had suspected for weeks. She was with child. "A baby," Samuel breathed when she told him, his hand immediately going to her still flat stomach. "Are you certain?" Nora nodded, her own joy mingled with trepidation. Dr. Williams confirmed it yesterday. He says the baby will come in December around Christmas. Samuel gathered her in his arms, his face alight with wonder and pride. A Christmas baby, he marveled, the best gift we could ask for. As summer progressed, the ranch flourished. Samuel hired additional hands, expanding the herd and improving the property. The house that had once seemed so foreign to Nora was now undeniably home. Filled with touches that reflected their shared life books Samuel bought on his trips to town. Wildflowers Nora arranged in mason jars. The quilt they'd made together during the long winter evenings. Nora's body changed with the seasons, her belly growing round as the baby within her developed. Samuel treated her with a mixture of awe and protectiveness that sometimes made her laugh. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she teased when he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry for her. "Indulge me," he replied, kissing her forehead. "I've never had a wife or child before. I'm figuring this out as I go." In September, a letter arrived from Boston from a former friend of Nora's father who had tracked her down. The creditors who had hounded her had been arrested for fraud. They had been charging exorbitant interest illegally and threatening debtors. More importantly, the letter explained that her father's business partner had been embezzling for years, a fact now proven in court. There was a small settlement for Nora, restitution for what had been stolen. "We don't need the money," was Samuel's only comment after reading the letter. Nora touched his arm. "No, but it closes that chapter. I'm not running anymore. This is where I belong." Their happiness was interrupted briefly in October when a band of outlaws passed through the county, robbing the bank in Hays City and killing a teller. Samuel joined the posse that tracked them, despite Nora's fears. "I have to go," he told her, checking his rifle before mounting his horse. "I can't ask other men to protect our town if I'm not willing to do the same." She understood, even as she worried. The memory of his close call in the blizzard was still fresh. "Come back to us," she said, placing his hand on her swollen belly where their child kicked vigorously. "We'll be waiting." The posse returned 3 days later, successful. The outlaws were in custody, the money recovered. Samuel came home with a minor bullet graze on his shoulder that he tried to hide from Nora. "You promised not to risk your life without saying goodbye," she reminded him, cleaning the wound with perhaps more force than necessary. "I came back, didn't I?" he countered, wincing. "Besides, it's barely a scratch." Their argument ended as most did, with laughter and reconciliation, the disagreement less important than their bond. As Nora's pregnancy advanced, Martha moved into the guest room to help with household tasks. The two women had become close, with Martha filling the maternal role Nora had lost years ago. "My mother died when I was 14, Nora confided one afternoon as they prepared preserves. "I've been afraid I won't know how to be a proper mother." Martha's capable hands didn't pause in their work. Being a proper mother isn't about knowing everything beforehand. It's about loving enough to learn as you go. The first snow fell in early December, dusting the ranch in white. Nora felt a strange symmetry in it a year ago. She had arrived broken and afraid. Now she was whole, loved, and about to bring new life into the world. Samuel was even more attentive as her time grew near, reading every book on childbirth he could find, ensuring the doctor knew to come at the first sign of labor. He expanded their bedroom to include a nursery alcove, crafting a cradle from oak with his own hands. "My father never did anything for me," he explained as he sanded the wood to silken smoothness. "I want our child to know from the first moment that they are cherished." On December 20th, during a gentle snowfall, Nora's labor began. Samuel sent a ranch hand galloping for the doctor, while Martha prepared the bedroom with clean linens and hot water. The labor was long and difficult. Through the night and into the next day, Nora fought to bring their child into the world, Samuel by her side, never leaving even when the doctor suggested he wait downstairs like most husbands. "I'm not most husbands," he said simply, holding Nora's hand as she weathered another contraction. As the sun set on December 21st, 1876, their son was born a healthy, robust boy with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. The doctor pronounced him perfect in every way, placing him in Nora's exhausted arms. "Hello, little one," she whispered, counting his tiny fingers and toes. "We've been waiting for you." Samuel sat beside them on the bed, his face transformed by a joy so profound it brought tears to Nora's eyes. "He's magnificent," he breathed, touching the baby's cheek with gentle reverence. "What shall we name him?" They had discussed names, but seeing their son, Nora knew exactly what he should be called. "William," she said, "after your grandfather who taught you to ranch, and Thomas, after my father. He made mistakes, but he loved me in his way." "William Thomas Xanders," Samuel tested the name. "A good, strong name for a good, strong boy." The next few days were a blur of wonder and exhaustion as they adjusted to life with a newborn. William, or Will, as they soon began calling him, had a hearty appetite and healthy lungs. Samuel proved to be a natural father, walking the floor with his son when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, watching over him while Nora rested. On Christmas morning, Samuel carried Will downstairs to see his first Christmas tree. The house was festooned with pine boughs and red ribbons, and a small stack of presents waited beneath the modest tree. "I know he's too young to remember," Samuel said, cradling his son, "but I wanted to start our family traditions right from the beginning." Nora, still moving slowly after the birth, settled into a chair by the fire. "It's perfect," she assured him. "Everything is perfect." They exchanged simple gifts: a new hat for Samuel, a leather-bound journal for Nora, tiny hand-knitted booties for Will. But their real gift was the family they had created, so different from what either had imagined a year ago. As winter settled over the Flying X, Nora often thought about that day she had stepped off the train in tears, certain she was making a terrible mistake. How wrong she had been. In Samuel, she had found not just security, but a love that sustained and challenged her. In Kansas, she had found not exile, but home. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked one evening as they sat by the fire while sleeping peacefully in his cradle beside them. "About how life takes unexpected turns," Nora replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "A year ago I was running away. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Samuel wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Remember what I said that first day? You don't have to pretend with me. I meant it then and I mean it now. You never have to be anything but exactly who you are." "And who am I, Samuel Xanders?" she asked softly. He kissed her then, a kiss full of the love and respect that had grown between them. "You're Nora Xanders," he said against her lips. "My wife, Will's mother, teacher, ranch mistress, and the bravest woman I've ever known. And I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have reason to cry again except perhaps from happiness." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the land in pristine white. Inside, the small family nestled together, warm and secure in the home and life they had built from unlikely beginnings. The mail-order bride who had arrived in tears had found not just a husband but a partner who saw her true self. And the cowboy who had once been alone had found a family to cherish and protect. As the new year of 1877 approached, bringing with it endless possibilities, Nora and Samuel faced it together, no longer pretending, no longer running, but standing side by side, ready for whatever adventures awaited them on the wide Kansas horizon.